Well, we've come inside to Future Space here at the University of the West of England. It's a very funky building full of cool and trendy people, and now, of course, we've turned up. But let me introduce you to our guests this morning. They are Sally Apps, who's the principal of the Bristol Metropolitan Academy in Fishponds in Bristol, Steve West, who's the Vice-Chancellor here at the University of the West of England, Robin Head from the National Union of Teachers in Somerset, and Laura Mays is the Conservative Cabinet Member for Education on Wiltshire Council. Welcome to you all. Sally, let's start with you. Is your school going to lose money, and if so, how much?
Yes, it's going to lose money. I don't think we can be entirely sure because we keep getting different calculations, but it is going to hit us quite hard. Our federation of 14 schools will take a hit, but our school accounts for half of that drop.
But you've been a successful academy. You are a successful academy.
Very successful, yes.
Dealing with some quite difficult issues?
Yeah, we have a high deprivation index. We have students from a range of different backgrounds, lots of students who have English as additional language, high poverty, and we've gone from the bottom of the city in terms of progress to the top in the last 7 years.
And do you think having a cut to your income threatens that?
I think it does. I think it makes life very difficult for school leaders who are making tough decisions. There's not much fat in the system now. We've already had to do a lot of cutting, a lot of rethinking, had to be quite creative with our resources already.
OK, so give me an example of what you might have to reduce.
It's difficult to know because we will look at everything. We look at every line of the budget and work out how we can work around that. Certainly within a federation, what we look at is procuring things together, for example, sharing resources between us.
Bulk buying, yeah. Okay.
We make sure that there's no fat in terms of additional staffing. We make sure that our staffing is lean but effective, and that it meets the needs of the kids. The kids come first every time. OK, let's go to Robin Head from the union. The government says it's spending more money on education than ever before.
So they say, but we would see that as profoundly dishonest in regard to a lot of those costs that the government say that they are covering with the money have been upped in terms of teacher pension payments, which the employer now has to pay, apprenticeship levy, national insurance contributions for all staff in the school, which means a lot of that money has been disappeared into those kind of fundings, which they lose. They've also been able to drag up 300.
So how much more would you like? How much more would you want to spend?
You can't say how much more. You have to meet the need, and the need is there to be met for all students in the country.
But the government is moving money from inner city schools to country areas where they've been traditionally underfunded. So you should be celebrating that in Wiltshire, shouldn't you?
You would think that, but, and I'm very proud of our schools in Wiltshire, we're doing a brilliant job. But for instance, the pupil funding for a child in Wiltshire is £5,200 a year. And in a London school is £12,000 a year, and the difference in that is extraordinary. And you're right in saying the government are saying that there's more money in the system, but the disparity between those, in my mind, is just patently unfair. And even though they've brought in this new formula, it isn't actually making things any better. So do you think
Wiltshire schools should have more money taken away from academies like the one that Sally runs?
I think there should be more money in the pot.
How much more?
Well, like you say, it's got to be based on need, and I'm a great believer in things being lean and not fat and so forth. But Wiltshire is the 7th lowest funded authority in the country for schools. So the new formula that has come in has meant that a few schools have got a slight rise, but as Robin said, huge amounts of extra costs are included in that, so the real rise is very, very small, and yet 29 of my schools are actually going to lose money. OK,
I should just tell you that we did try very hard to get someone from the government on this programme to talk about that, but we couldn't find a Conservative MP to come on, or an Education Minister or Secretary of State, so we have tried. Steve West from UWE, just give us your take on this. Are you seeing schools underfunded? I mean, if you look around here, education seems to have plenty of money.
Yeah, universities are pretty well funded now, but in schools, the way I look at this is about the UK's future. This is about developing future generations to add to our economic power in a global knowledge economy. If we do not get schools funded correctly, we will not be able to take a place globally. So this is pretty fundamental to me. This is about getting the right sort of schooling at all levels to give people opportunity for a future which is pretty uncertain, But what I can tell you is all of the growth is going to be in high-tech industries, and we need to prepare young people for that. If schools are underfunded, the platform just isn't there to give them that chance.
Okay, well, just what the government might tell you is that in the UK, our schools are better funded than France, Italy and Japan, for example.
Well, we want to be a global player. They've mentioned
they are
three
big
countries.
economies.
Well, they've mentioned 3 economies there. There are a lot more economies that are putting a lot more into schools than we are at the moment. So I would argue with the government, if you want a bright future, let's start getting some of the fundamentals right. Because at the moment, my concern is we have huge educational inequalities across our cities and in rural areas, and we've clearly got a problem. And whilst some of that can be solved by being more efficient, more effective, the multi-academy type approach, where we're joining schools together to get those efficiencies, it's not going to solve everything.
You run a school where there is high levels of deprivation, and you've seen poverty. And of course, if you increase public spending, you have to increase taxation. How do you think that would go down with your parents?
I think it's true for most parents. If you ask them what their priorities would be in terms of where their taxes were spent, they would say that the education of their children is high on that list. And so I think that if it's going into something where you are giving a better service to those children, there are few parents that would have an issue with that.
And what about this debate between country and school and inner city schools? You're losing money, so country schools can get more.
I think
it evens
to
up.
be fair,
Is that fair?
I know. I think honestly, to talk about winners and losers in this system is a misnomer. There are no winners. Honestly, we can see that there is resource coming from one place and going to another, but actually, even those schools that are gaining are looking at what they gained and thinking, this doesn't feel like what I thought I would gain for my school.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Sally and the teachers in her school have worked really hard to turn the fortunes of academic achievement in their school around. Why would you kneecap that by taking large amounts of money away from them to thinly spread it through country areas where it does no good at all? You talked about taxation. It's not about taxing the ordinary people on the street. There's a lot of people out there who don't get taxed and should pay tax. That's a different argument for a different day. But there is also £320 million being identified for grammar schools, which nobody wants and nobody had in their manifesto.
Well, look, hang on, we spend £80 billion a year on education. 300 million quid is neither here nor there, is it?
No, but at the same time, it's about what you want. It's about pet projects, isn't it? Where the money has been going recently is into the uncalculated pension costs, NI costs and apprenticeship levies which schools now have to face, and that has screamed them off the top.
Now come on, Laura, you're a Conservative, so they wouldn't come in person, as it were, to defend this, so what have you got to say?
Well, I'm in violent agreement, and I'm not happy with the way things are going educationally in the country, and that is one of the reasons I was pleased to have this opportunity to speak out. I agree with you about the grammar schools. We've made it very clear to Justine Greening that it would be an inappropriate policy for a rural authority like ours.
So you're not going to defend the government, just cut to the chase?
No, I'm not going to defend the government on these issues, and you know, particularly this issue of the fairer funding, and there are 40 of us, 40 local authorities. I put my name to a letter to the Prime Minister very recently to say that the new funding formula is still incredibly unfair, and because of the way they're capping it, it would take 10 years for us to make up that space.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thank you. Well, that was Paul Baltrop. Well, let's just pick up on some of those issues. And Steve West, now you're the Vice-Chancellor here at UE. Your route into further education wasn't perhaps the typical one, but it's quite inspirational. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, I started off at school. I wasn't particularly good. I failed most of my GCSEs and A-levels, and then I retook them. And then I went to further education, and then I did a part-time degree. So not the classic approach to getting to become a Vice-Chancellor in a university.
And you're the boss man here, Vast University, and you're a surgeon as well.
Yeah. So I worked hard, but fairly late in my career.
So what would you say to those students in South Bristol who aren't aspiring to become students?
First thing is believe in yourselves. There is nothing that you cannot do, but you need to make sure that you have the ambition and that you're being signposted. So for us, we work in those South Bristol schools very hard. We send our students, we send our outreach staff in to try and raise aspiration. This is about giving young people choices, and it's about believing in them. Every single child has a talent. What we have to do is find it and work with it. Yeah. And that's really, really important.
Sally, how many of your children would aspire to go to university from the sort of school in a deprived area that you run?
Many students would aspire to go to university. They all would aspire to go on to something, some further study, education, employment or training.
What would put them off?
There's a number of things. I think I don't think we can ignore the layers of deprivation, the ways in which being deprived in terms of your experience, your opportunity, your parents' experience, what that means in terms of what you can access and what you believe for yourself. And I think sometimes the greatest enemy of that are adults in your life who don't believe you can do it, and that sometimes can be your teachers. And so it's actually really important that teachers in schools and that support staff, that our careers advisors have a strong sense that students can go on to university and will help them to get there and don't have any limits on their aspiration for them.
Do you accept that sort of criticism of teachers, Robin?
Well, I don't think it's teachers necessarily, but I think it's the system. I think we've got a system which is highly stratified in terms of accountability measures. I think schools are made to jump through hoops which require them to teach in a certain way and deliver exam results. That mitigates against the aspiration against some of those white working class boys and some of the ethnic minorities we see that are lower achievers. That knocks onto their aspiration about going forward.
Do you accept that?
No, actually, my experience is that the reality is that that kind of target-driven culture, if you like, means that we have to have those high expectations
Maybe
of children
in your school,
who
Sally,
might not
but
otherwise get that.
I will say this point. You will see that there are statistics around in this country which say that a lot of children disappear off of school rolls at just about the time GCSE comes up, because those children will hold back the scores in league tables, and those children disappear from schools. Maybe not in your school.
No, that's not something I recognise.
But it does happen in this country because the statistics are out there.
But I still think you need to make the point about whether university is the right thing.
Yeah.
And I have two sons. I think one is at university, and I'm not sure about the other, because I think what's important is to find the right path. You said to identify early, get to do the right course, whether it's an apprenticeship or a degree or whatever it is. But I think this idea that 50% of people were meant to go on to university was a bit of a false promise.
So we're a university that's doing the degree apprenticeships. We're working with FE colleges around apprenticeships with businesses. So that's a whole world alongside what we do within the university. And I also don't think people should think about universities as being academic and apprenticeships being vocational. In this modern world, it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Our programmes are about ensuring that young people and older people returning to university can get employment in the right areas.
And that has to start in school also.
And that has to start
But
at school.
Steve, isn't there quite a few disillusioned graduates out there who spend £27,000 plus on a degree, go outside and find actually it's not getting them a job because there's sort of grade inflation, really. Everyone's got a degree.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And in an economy that increasingly is focusing on that high technology environment, it is tough. The jobs that are being created are not the middle management jobs anymore. Highly skilled jobs, and then at the other end, the labour jobs that still require people until we invent robots that can do it for us.
So are you misleading people to a certain extent if you offer, I think you're offering 600 courses here, and there must be among those some which give you very few employment opportunities afterwards?
So our statistics will tell you that over 95% of our students, 96% of our students, 6 months after graduating are in employment. That's a pretty good statistic.
That's very good.
Well over 75% are in graduate.
Yeah.
Well over 75% in graduate level jobs. Now that's an impressive statistic. The reason we get those statistics is because we work hard to make sure that in every degree, no matter what the subject, we're focused on employment. We're focused on getting them into graduate jobs.
And Sally, the children that you teach and you lead, how much would that £27,000 bill deter them?
I think it really does. The reality, if you've grown up in poverty, then the reality of facing more debt is frightening for you and for your family. And let's not ignore the fact that job security, to go into a job where you know that what you're going to get paid, it might be lower than a graduate, but you know what you're going to get paid and you know you're going to actually get it.
And those people are needed. We need people,
Absolutely.
don't we, to do everyday work.
Absolutely,
Not everyone
and
can
it
be a
needs to be a
graduate.
choice. I think that's the thing. Actually, what we need to see is that children understand the choices that are available to them. If you want to be a hairdresser, if you want to open your own florist, whatever it is that you want to do, as long as you know how to do that and you know that you had a choice, that's important. What we don't want is people having poverty of choice choice.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you. And on that note, that's where we have to leave things for this week. My thanks to everybody here at UWE for keeping us occupied and entertained this week. My thanks also to Steve West, Sally Apps, Robin Head and Laura Mays. Well, we've got a couple of weeks off now for Easter, back then on the election trail for the local election campaign. In the meantime, you can keep up with things on Twitter, and you can watch this programme again on the iPlayer if you'd like to. But now let's return to London and Andrew, who's waiting for us.